Hi, I'm Josh, and today I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes showing how you can use value stream maps to chart your journey to continuous deployment. So just to kick off with the 3 key takeaways from the next 10 minutes, the first is that value stream maps are about how you deliver, not what you deliver. The second is software delivery is really all about confidence at the end of the day. And thirdly, continuous deployment is a realistic target for most teams. I'd wager over 90% of teams could and should be doing continuous deployment, and there isn't any good reason why most teams can't look to this. So the obligatory About Me slide. I'm a principal consultant at Contino, who are a specialist digital transformation consultancy, and we mostly work with regulated enterprises. I'm an AWS Partner Network Ambassador and also a HashiCorp Ambassador. So generally I do a lot of talking and a lot of blogging and all those kind of good things. So let's just quickly settle on a definition for continuous deployment, which I think is critical for this. So it's every time a commit is merged into a shared branch, it's deployed into production with no human involvement. So no human gets involved from merging into mainline and production. Cool. And really, when you get down to it, it's about maximizing the amount of time you spend delivering value. When it comes to software development, you want to spend as much time writing code and the least time moving code around. So this is what continuous deployment gives you and is really all about. It's important to frame this with what does good software delivery look like? How can we understand when we're doing well? How can we understand what's good versus what's bad? And in 2013, the Accelerate book came out that outlined these 4 metrics of lead time, deployment frequency, time to restore service, and change failure rate. And the metrics I put on this slide are for elite teams, which interestingly, over the last couple of years, now makes up 20% of all teams. And that percentage is growing every year. So these are our targets. And the 2 we're going to look at most today are lead time, which is less than a day, and deployment frequency multiple times per day, right? So value stream maps. They came out of Lean and the Toyota production system out of Japan. And what we're going to look at today is quite a slimmed down, simplified version of a value stream map. They're really powerful, but often to just get the benefits from this, you don't need to go through the whole process, especially at first. And what we're going to talk about is that first initial foray into looking at how you work. And all we're going to do is draw the process that takes an idea and puts it into production. How do we do that within the team? How does that work? This is something I do day one of almost every engagement I do because it's the quickest way for me to understand how the team currently works. And then we can start looking at how we might improve that. And all we're going to use for this are post-it notes and a whiteboard. The classic kind of simplified, agile, just get it down and have a look at it way of working. So with the whiteboard, you draw a symbol for an idea on one side, generally a light bulb. And on the right-hand side, generally you'll draw some money or something signifying value. And then with your post-it notes, have a separate color for each kind of branch that you have. So feature branch, mainline, and develop. Now the example I'm going to use today is using Gitflow for the branching strategy, hence I've got 3. And as you go through that process and map it all out, what you'll end up with is something that looks like this. Now, don't worry if you can't read this. Please don't read it. We're going to dive into the bits that matter for what we're talking about today. So if we zoom in a little bit and we go from the point where a pull request is merged from someone doing some local development and getting that to production, we can see there's a few steps involved. So there's waiting for the QA team to be available and having time to run the tests. There's deploying to a staging environment. There's manual QA testing, and then there's a deployment to production. And from these post-its alone, we can understand the deployment frequency and the lead time. And this is very common numbers that I see in a lot of teams going through their agile journey, normally fairly early stage, where they're doing Scrum and like, okay, we'll release every 2 weeks. And that gives you a deployment frequency of once every 2 weeks and a lead time of 2 weeks. Awesome. But that's about a factor of 10 behind where we were. This is not a 10% change we need to make. This is 1,000% improvement we need to make. This sounds kind of huge, but at least by putting it on a piece of paper, we can have the right conversations and drive forward and figure out where we want to be. And at this point, it becomes crucial to understand what it is that allows us to deploy to production. It's not the product owner's approval as much as it's having the confidence that the value of the release is more than the risk of the release. So whatever we're releasing, we're confident that it will deliver more value than any risk posed by introducing bugs. Simple. That's all we're trying to do through this process, through what we've mapped. We're trying to build this confidence. And if we just drill down a little bit, we see 4 locations that are involved in building confidence. We've got continuous integration and pull request reviewing, simple enough. And then we've got waiting for QA availability and manual QA testing. And when you look at the numbers and the time it takes for each of these, you see that the QA testing is what's determining how frequently we can deploy. Like, unless we change that, we really can't move that much faster. The manual QA takes a couple of days. Waiting for the team takes up to 5 days because they do it once a sprint. This is something that fundamentally needs to change. Otherwise, we can't move faster. We can't become elite with this the way it is. And where teams end up at when they're in a situation is they quite quickly realize that the QA process can't exist in its current guise. And where QA generally fits after going through this process is that QA is about exploratory testing, not regression testing. The team needs to automate all the regression testing away and keep it working quickly, because now you fully remove that QA waiting time, and also instead of it taking 2 days to test, you might be down to half an hour or something much better than that, right? And the next step is drawing out what the future state, like what's the next state you want to get to? What do you want your process to look like? And often it will start to look something a bit more like this. So the local development story hasn't changed, but what happens once that PR is merged has changed quite significantly. And if we just look at it a little bit closer, we've got automated QA testing and we've got exploratory testing now. Like, those didn't exist before. So now our QA testing is quick, it's easy, there's no waiting. And now we can use things like feature flags or canary deployments, or even just blue-green deployments, to allow us to de-risk deploying to production in a way that's much faster. And if your process starts to look like this, that deploying multiple times a day and it only taking a day or less than a day to get into production starts to look like quite possible and quite easy, right? And I did say I would talk to when this beautiful nirvana I've kind of put down on the page isn't really possible. And those are the cases where you have an inherently high risk of release or inherently high cost of change. To tell you a story from my past, I used to have to do a 20-hour plane round trip to deploy to production. I wasn't happy with the continuous deployment because if there was a bug, I'd have to jump on that plane again to go and make the change. So we had to do the process slightly differently, and we needed more stable branching in that sense. But if you're deploying to the cloud, this is something you can do today, and there really should be no reason you can't. So just to swing back around to the key takeaways, value stream maps are about how you deliver, not what you deliver. Software delivery is all about confidence and building confidence, and that continuous deployment is a realistic target for over 90% of teams. You are unlikely to have the risk or the cost inherently in your system that means you can't do this. And it really should be where you're aiming for, because it will make you happier than anything else at work ever has. So hopefully I've inspired you. Go and have a crack at value stream mapping. I think you'll really like it.